Welcome to week 3 of the Winter Growth Series. Today, we're going to talk about pricing for profits. Obviously, that's something that everybody wants to do, but most people have no idea how to make all the numbers work and make the math work. Some of you, you're watching this video and you've never even used a spreadsheet. You probably never even thought about these things. You probably have just priced based on what others in your area are pricing. Not a good spot to be, and if that's what you are, you are definitely going to plateau. You're going to time out at some point. It's really important that you understand and figure out how to come up with these numbers. You know, last week we talked about marketing. This week we're talking about how to actually price the work so you have money to spend on marketing. And so this week, how can you make sure that everything in your business is jiving in a way that you always have profit left at the end of the day so you can spend money on marketing, so then you can go and grow your business. You price based on what competitors are pricing, or you're like, oh, I know Joe down the street charges $50 to mow lawns, I'll come in and do it for $45. If you continuously do that, you are doing nothing but devaluing yourself and the value that you're creating in somebody else's life. If you are doing a job for somebody, mowing their lawn, you are making their life more convenient. And if you add more value to them, you can typically charge more money to them. So then that increases your value. What else can you add to increase the prices that you can pay? Typically people who have very limited knowledge, they don't know how to market, they don't know how to price themselves, they're in a race to the bottom. You know, if you look at restaurants, you never typically have those middle of the road restaurants. They don't last long term. You either have kind of the premium market and those restaurants stay around for a long time, or you have the super cheap like the McDonald's and you have to have tons and tons and tons of customers. And that business is even harder to run than the premium business because it takes a lot more systems, it takes a lot more staff, it takes a hell of a lot more customers, a lot more marketing to get those customers than it is to figure out how to be a premium service and charge customers accordingly. Another reason is you fear losing customers, so you never raise your price. You never price appropriately for you to actually make money, so you run yourself into burnout. You're like, hey, I can just work another 15 hours a week, and now you're working 80 hours a week in the field. You got to work at home too, and you just get burnt out. That's why a lot of businesses become unsustainable, because you're not charging enough money. Let's just get right into it. We're going to talk about a couple metrics that are very basic that you have to know. The first one we're going to talk about is COGS, so the cost of goods sold. Your cost of goods sold is going to be everything it takes to get the job done. The labor, the materials on the job, the subcontractors you might have used. At Blue Duck, we include fuel in that. Once you add all that up for the entire month or the entire year, and you're going to divide that by your total income. And that is going to give you your COGS percentage. Now, I can't give you a range of success because I don't know who you are, what kind of business you're running, but a company that does more maintenance work, so mowing, mulch, the shrub trimming, it's going to be very different than, you know, a product-based business like fertilization or landscaping. All of them are going to be very different, so I don't want to give you a range of this is what you should be at, because it's not possible for me to generalize that for everybody. So you got to know your costs. You got to know your overhead. What does it cost to run your business outside of the field getting the actual production done? So do you have rent? Do you have cell phones that you got to pay for? Do you have insurance? What are all those other things? Do you buy shirts? Do you have a website? Do you do marketing? All those costs become overhead, and you need to know what your overhead percentage is. So take all of those costs, those overhead costs, and divide it by your total income. That will give you your overhead percentage. Every business is going to be a little bit different. If you're doing big projects, landscape work, you might not need any office staff. If you run a high production fertilizing company, you might have a lot of office staff. You might have a bigger office building. So those numbers and percentages are going to be a little bit different. What really matters is, does it work for your business? And so this will all tie together here in a minute for you. You need to know your COGS. You got to know your overhead. You need to know your profit percentage. So your profit percentage is going to be, if you take your total income, subtract your COGS, subtract your overhead, whatever that number is left, that is your profit. Take the profit, divide it by your total income, that's going to give you your profit percentage. As you're smaller, you're going to have higher profit, and as you start to grow, your profit's going to go down. Eventually, a bigger business is actually easier to run because now you can delegate different tasks to different people, and it's not all on your plate. As you get to that $500,000 range, it's going to be incredibly difficult for you because you're going to be running on all cylinders, you're going to be working lots of hours, because you don't necessarily have enough money to go out and hire a lot of people in the office to help you. But as you get that million, that $2, the $3 million mark, you have a lot more office staff that is able to take off some of those things, so then you don't have to run 100-hour a week trying to survive anymore. One thing I really want to tell you is that if you have loans of any sort, maybe it's a car loan where you took a loan out for a line of credit and you have an open line of credit, that doesn't show up in your profit and loss statement. That lives on your balance sheet. Those payments have to come out of your profit. That profit percentage is net profit before an owner might take a distribution or before you have to make loan payments. So make sure that you don't say, oh, looks like I have $100,000 in net profit. Well, where's all my money? Well, most of it is probably because you may have taken a distribution and it doesn't show up there, or you may have loan payments that don't show up in the profit and loss statement. So that could be where your money is. But you need to know, you need to have a good bookkeeper making sure that those things are not happening and know where all your money is at all times. Now, as we get into pricing for profit, you have to know the overhead, the COGS, and your profit percentage. That's where you kind of start. That's why it's really good to have historical data from your business. And now we're going to look at our loaded labor rate. This number tells you what your break-even number is, essentially. That means if you're not generating this hourly rate per hour that your field staff is out in the field, you will not be able to make budget. You will not be able to pay all your bills. What you're going to do is you're going to add the average hourly rate plus their burden. So their burden would be like workers' comp, whatever their tax liability burden is. So whatever that burden is, so it's the tax and the workers' comp, you're going to add that onto your hourly rate. So you're going to divide those taxes out by the amount of hours that they work. You're going to figure out whatever that average is. You're going to add it to your average hourly rate. Let's say you have 5 employees and they're all different hourly rates. Add them up, divide by 5. And you're going to add it to your overhead recovery. The people that are in your office, the rent, the insurance, there's no way that those people are in production. I call it dead weight on the business. The only way that you can recover and pay those bills are by the people that are in the field. Just like we got our overhead percentage, you're going to take your total overhead, you're going to divide it by the total amount of labor hours that you have for the entire year. Okay, so if you don't have a CRM that is tracking how many hours your team is working, like my CRM tells me our field staff works 10,000 hours or 20,000 hours or whatever it is, whatever your total overhead is, divide it by the total amount of hours that your team in the field worked throughout the entire season. That's going to give you a number. So what that number tells you is every single hour your guys are in production, you're recovering $12 or whatever that is to pay your overhead for the year. You're going to take your total overhead divided by your total labor hours, and you're going to add that to your average labor rate plus burden. That is going to give you your break-even number. Let's say that number is $53, for example. If you were charging $50, that means every hour that you are working, you are losing $3 per hour, and you have no idea. That's why it is so incredibly important to understand your numbers and figure these things out. And if you don't know, ask a question. I'd be more than happy to help you, but you need to know this. So you need to know your break-even number, and this is exactly how you price for profit. Now you need to add in, what are my total loans for the year? Okay, I got truck payments, I got equipment payments, I got all these payments. I need to divide that number also by the amount of hours we worked. So I got to recover that. So add that in. Maybe it took your break-even number from $53 to $65. So you now accommodate for all of the loans that you got to repay. Now we're at $65 and our company is just breaking even. I want to pay myself as a distribution from profits because it's my business, right? So now you're going to add your desired amount of profit that you want at the end of the year, divide that by the amount of hours that you worked, and that goes in. To add profit into this, you're going to add the amount of profit that you want in, and maybe you're at $85 an hour. So now you need to be charging $85 an hour to pay for all your overhead, pay for all your COGS, pay for all your debt payments, your debt servicing, and your profit. And if you always charge that, you know that you are going to make money and you're going to have money left over at the end of the season for profit. Let's say that you have no idea what you're charging and you just make up, oh, well, everybody's charging $50 an hour, so I'm going to charge $50 an hour. But the math says that you need to be charging $85 an hour. You're going to be going out of business very soon. So it pays to understand how to use spreadsheets and how to figure out these numbers and make a profit at the end of the year. You need to know your COGS, you need to know your overhead, profit percentage, and your loaded labor rate. Once you figure all those out, you take your loaded labor rate and you are going to add to your loaded labor rate debt payments, profit payments, and then that's going to tell you what you need to charge per hour. But if you don't know how many hours you worked this year, you're kind of at a dead end and you're going to have to kind of guess a little bit. Maybe go back and look at all your payroll that you've made and try and figure out how many hours your team worked. If you are in the field, you need to account for the amount of hours you worked as well. So then you can figure out, how can I price for profits? The worst thing is going in and going into a Facebook group and asking, how much do I charge for this? Well, it doesn't matter, because a $1 million company should charge far different than a $10 million company. Our overheads are totally different. As you're smaller and you don't have as much overhead, you should be making a much bigger profit simply because you can charge what the market charges, but you don't have all the overhead that you have to recover to pay the market price. If any of that didn't make sense, please reach out to somebody. I'm more than happy to help you guys. I want to see you guys succeed in 2025. I wish you guys the best for 2025, and I can't wait for next week, because next week is going to be a banger also.